The sky turned angry as the celestial Voyager fell. First came the warnings, then the alarms, and finally the terrible sound of metal tearing apart. The ship, once a proud vessel of the Galactic Alliance, now lay scattered across the green. Hills of an uncharted planet. Alex Mason opened his eyes. His head hurt, but he was alive. He touched his forehead, and his fingers came away with blood. Not too much, though. He had been lucky. The maintenance bay's emergency protocols had saved him when the ship broke apart. Around him, escape pods had deployed automatically for most of the crew, but not everyone had made it to safety. Alex pulled himself up and looked around at the wreckage. The main sections of the ship were gone, jumped to emergency hyperspace, or crashed elsewhere. He stood alone in a field of twisted metal and sparking wires. Then he heard voices, not human ones. Life support failing. Emergency backup at 47% and dropping. The voice was high and clicked between words. Calm yourself, Zilara. The beacon is active. Help will come. This voice was deeper, but had the same clicking sound. Alex walked toward the voices. Around a large piece of the ship's hull, he found them two Shirani. Their tall, thin bodies were covered in silvery environmental suits. Their four-fingered hands moved quickly over damaged control panels. Large eyes blinked nervously behind their clear face shields. "Hello there," Alex said. "I'm Alex Mason, maintenance tech. Are you two all right?" The taller Shirani turned, surprise visible in those big eyes. "A human survivor. I am Science Officer Linda Ortiz, and this is Navigation Specialist Keith Warren." Alex noted they had taken human names for easier communication, as was common protocol for Shirani serving on mixed-species vessels. "Our suits are compromised," Keith said, tapping a flashing red light on his wrist panel. "Environmental controls failing. Very bad situation." Alex looked up at the darkening sky. How long until rescue? Linda made a series of rapid calculations on her wrist device. Beacon signal confirmed received. Nearest Alliance vessel will arrive in 5 planetary cycles. Approximately 1 of your Earth weeks. Alex frowned. 1 week. And those clouds don't look friendly. The sky was indeed turning a strange purple-gray color. Wind whipped across the crash site, carrying an earthy smell that promised rain. "Our immediate priority is to recover functional technology," Keith said, turning back to the damaged panel. "Perhaps we can repair a communication array or fabricate a temporary shelter." Alex watched as the two Shirani pulled at the broken equipment. Their movements were becoming more desperate as their suit warnings continued to beep. "The atmospheric composition is breathable," Linda said, studying her readings. "But temperatures will drop significantly during night cycle. Our biology is not adapted for exposure." Alex knew the Shirani came from a womb-controlled environment. Their homeworld. Cities were entirely enclosed in climate-regulated domes. Most had never experienced raw nature in their lives. "We should move away from the crash site," Alex suggested. "Find natural shelter before the storm hits." Keith made a dismissive gesture. "Primitive solutions are inefficient. If we can restore power to this console, we can fabricate whatever we need." Alex watched them work for a few more minutes. Their fingers, better suited for delicate technical work than his own, moved quickly over the systems. But the damage was too extensive. Every attempt ended with sparks or dead circuits. The first droplets of rain began to fall. Alex looked toward the edge of the forest about half a kilometer away. He made his decision. "I'm going to scout ahead," he announced. "See what resources we have available." Linda looked up briefly. "Be cautious. Unknown biological hazards may be present." Alex nodded and set off toward the trees. The rain was falling harder now, soaking through his maintenance jumpsuit. He didn't mind. Growing up in rural Oregon, he had spent more time outdoors than in. His grandfather had taught him to read the land, to see resources where others saw obstacles. The forest edge revealed treasures to Alex's trained eye. Flexible young saplings that could be bent without breaking. Broad leaves that repelled water, rather than absorbing it. Vines that could be used for binding. He gathered as much as he could carry, testing the strength and flexibility of each item. By the time Alex returned to the crash site, the Shirani were huddled miserably under a piece of hull plating they had propped up. Rain streamed in from the sides, and their suits beeped warnings about temperature regulation failures. "This isn't working," Linda admitted, her voice shivering slightly. "Our suits were not designed for prolonged exposure." Alex dropped his gathered materials and began sorting them methodically. "Then we adapt. We use what we have." Keith watched with confusion as Alex began to work. The human's hands moved with practiced efficiency, stripping bark, testing the flexibility of branches, weaving smaller pieces together. "What are you doing?" Keith asked finally. "Building a shelter," Alex replied simply, not pausing in his work. "My grandfather taught me. He said humans have been making homes from the land since before we had tools, but without proper materials or fabrication technology," Linda began. Alex smiled as he bent a flexible branch into an arch and secured it with vine. "Humans had to survive long before we had technology. We learned to work with nature, not against it." The Shirani watched in silent disbelief as a structure began to take shape. First a simple frame, then a lattice of smaller branches. Alex layered. The broad leaves he'd found in overlapping patterns that shed water away from the center dot. As the rain grew heavier and the wind stronger, Alex worked faster. His hands were scratched and muddy, but he didn't slow down. The Shirani's temporary shelter was now failing completely, water pooling around their feet as the wind pushed the whole piece aside. "You should come help," Alex called over the increasing storm. "Many hands make light work." Linda stepped forward first, hesitant but curious. "What should I do?" Alex handed her some vines. "Twist these together to make them stronger. Like this." He demonstrated the simple technique. As darkness began to fall and the storm intensified, the three survivors worked together on their primitive shelter. The Shirani were clumsy at first, their long fingers better suited for touchscreens than raw materials, but they learned quickly. The rain fell harder. Lightning cracked across the sky. And still they built. Morning came with a brief break in the rain. The shelter Alex had built stood firm against the night's storm. It wasn't pretty, but it had kept them dry. The structure resembled an A-frame hut with a sloped roof that guided water away from the entrance. Inside, Alex had created a raised platform of branches, covered with broad leaves to keep them off the wet ground. Keith emerged first, his silver environmental suit now dirty and scratched. He looked at their shelter with new eyes. During the night, he had been too exhausted and cold to appreciate what they had built. Now, in the gray morning light, he saw the simple genius of it. "It held," he said with surprise in his voice. Alex was already awake, sitting near the entrance and weaving more branches together. "It's just the beginning. We need to improve it before the next storm comes." Linda joined them, her large eyes blinking in the daylight. "My suit's power is nearly depleted," she reported. "Environmental controls offline, but I remain ... adequately comfortable." Alex nodded. "The shelter blocks wind and keeps rain out. Your bodies can handle the rest, at least for a while." Keith walked around their simple hut, studying how the branches were connected. Without fabricators or bonding agents, how do these stay together? Alex held up a piece of vine he was working with. "These plants grow by wrapping around trees. They're naturally strong and flexible. Nature already made what we needed. We just had to find it." The Shirani had never considered such an approach. On their homeworld, all materials were created in molecular factories. The idea of using unprocessed biological matter seemed primitive to them. Yet here they were, alive because of these primitive methods. "We need food and water," Alex said, standing up, "and we should gather more materials before the rain returns." The three survivors set out to explore their surroundings. Alex showed the Shirani how to identify useful resources. He demonstrated how to test a plant's strength by trying to break it, how to spot which leaves repelled water best, and how to find rocks with useful shapes. "Your knowledge is unexpected," Linda said as she watched Alex test the flexibility of a sapling. "Your species profile indicates humans rely heavily on technology." Alex smiled. "Most do nowadays. But my grandfather believed in keeping old skills alive. He took me camping every summer with minimal gear. Said a human should never forget how to use their hands and mind to survive." Keith was examining a rock formation nearby. "This seems inefficient compared to fabrication technology." "Maybe," Alex agreed, "but it works when technology fails. And there's something satisfying about making something with your own hands." By midday, they had collected enough materials to significantly improve their shelter. Alex showed the Shirani how to use sharp stones to cut vines and branches. Their long, nimble fingers quickly adapted to the work. Despite their initial reluctance, both aliens began to show interest in these new skills. "The rain is coming back," Linda announced, looking at the darkening sky. Her suit could still measure basic atmospheric conditions, even with failing power. Hurried back to their shelter. Alex immediately began reinforcing the structure while teaching the Shirani what to do. Keith proved especially good at weaving branches into tight patterns after he understood the principle. "Your species evolved from tree-dwelling ancestors, correct?" Keith asked as his fingers worked. Alex nodded. "Primigis. We climbed trees and built nests long before we built houses." "That explains much," Keith said. "Shirani evolved in underground hive structures. We never developed natural building instincts. Our ancestors expanded existing cave systems until we developed technology to create artificial environments." The rain began again, gentler than before, but steady. Inside their improved shelter, Alex showed the aliens how to create a small, controlled fire using dry materials he had collected. The Shirani watched in fascination as the flames grew. "Fire without technology," Linda whispered. "I have only seen this in historical records." "It's one of humanity's first and most important discoveries," Alex explained. "It changed everything for us." The warmth from the small fire filled their shelter. Alex had created a simple vent in the roof that allowed smoke to escape while keeping rain out. The Shirani moved closer to the fire, their bodies relaxing in its warmth. "Why are humans classified as a developing species in the Galactic Alliance database?" Linda asked suddenly. "Your adaptability suggests advanced evolution." Alex shrugged. "We're newcomers to space travel. Most Alliance species had interstellar capability thousands of years before us." "A flawed classification system," Keith said, surprising both of them. "It measures only technological achievement, not adaptability or survival potential." As night fell again, the storm intensified. Wind howled around their shelter, but the reinforced structure held firm. Rain pounded against the leaf-covered roof, but little water made it inside. The three huddled around their small fire, sharing stories of their lives. Linda explained the complex hierarchy of Shirani society, where status was determined by technological innovation. Keith spoke of his fascination with navigation and the mathematical beauty of plotting courses through space. Alex told them about growing up in the forests of Oregon, learning from his grandfather, while most kids were focused on virtual worlds and computer interfaces. "Tomorrow we should create tools," Alex said as the fire burned low. With better tools, we can build more effectively. Teach me, Linda said. I wish to understand how you think. Even Keith nodded in agreement. Your methods are unorthodox but effective. The Alliance training never covered such scenarios. Outside, the storm raged on. Lightning flashed, illuminating their shelter for brief moments. But inside, the three survivors were dry, warm, and beginning to understand each other in ways that went beyond their differences. Alex looked at the improved shelter with satisfaction. What had started as a simple frame was now a sturdy structure with walls that blocked wind, a roof that shed water efficiently, and a floor that kept them above the muddy ground. It wasn't beautiful or high-tech, but it worked. Human ingenuity, Linda said softly, following Alex's gaze. Now I understand why your species has survived, despite so many challenges. We adapt, Alex said simply. It's what humans do best. As they settled in for another night, the human and the two aliens found themselves growing comfortable in each other's company. Their differences seemed less important now. Survival had a way of stripping things down to what truly mattered. And as Alex fell asleep, he couldn't help but smile at the irony. Here he was, a simple maintenance technician, teaching advanced aliens how to survive using methods thousands of years old. His grandfather would have loved the story. The third day on the planet brought stronger winds and darker clouds. Alex woke early and stepped outside their shelter. He studied the sky with concern. His years in Oregon had taught him to read weather patterns, and what he saw worried him. This would be worse than the previous storms inside the shelter. Linda and Keith were examining their environmental suits. The power cells were completely drained now. The suits are just fancy clothes at this point, Alex said as he returned. Inside, we need to prepare for a big storm coming. Keith looked up. How can you determine that without sensors or atmospheric monitoring? Alex pointed to the clouds visible through their doorway. See how they're moving? And that dark color? That's not a normal rain shower. Something big is building. Linda tilted her head, curious. You can predict weather patterns through visual observation alone? Not perfectly, but enough to know we need to get ready, Alex replied. He picked up the stone tools they had made the previous day. We need to strengthen everything before it hits. The three worked quickly. Alex showed them how to dig a small trench around their shelter to direct water away. They gathered more flexible branches to reinforce the walls and roof. Using sharp stones, they cut thicker logs to create a stronger frame. These structures work with the forces of nature rather than against them, Alex explained as he showed Keith how to bend branches without breaking them. Rigid things snap in strong winds. Flexible things bend and survive. Keith nodded slowly. Like Shirani mathematics, we have a concept called adaptive resistance equations that change their values in response to new variables rather than breaking down. Exactly, Alex said with a smile. Same principle, different application. By midday, dark clouds covered the entire sky. The wind grew stronger, making the trees around them sway and creak. Their improved shelter looked much more substantial now. The walls were thicker, the roof more tightly woven, and the floor raised higher off the ground. Linda had proven especially skilled at weaving smaller branches into tight patterns that blocked wind but allowed some light through. She stood back, admiring her work on one wall. I have never created anything with my hands before, she admitted. On our world, we design virtually and machines build. How does it feel? Alex asked. Linda's large eyes blinked thoughtfully. Satisfying. There is a direct connection between effort and result that our technology often removes. The first heavy raindrops began to fall. They were larger than before, hitting the ground with audible splats. The three hurried to complete their final preparations. Alex had created a stone-lined fire pit in the center of their shelter with a clever smoke vent above it. Keith had constructed a raised storage platform to keep their gathered supplies. "Dry, get inside," Alex called as the rain intensified. "It's starting." They huddled in their shelter as the storm arrived in full force. Rain hammered against their roof. Wind howled around them, testing every joint and binding they had made. But their work held firm. The ship's wreckage wouldn't have protected. "U.S. from this," Keith observed, watching water flow through the trench they had dug rather than into their shelter. "Maybe not," Alex agreed. "Technology is amazing, but sometimes simple solutions work better for basic needs." The storm grew more intense as hours passed. Lightning flashed regularly now, followed by booming thunder that shook the ground. Outside, they could hear trees cracking in the violent wind. Linda moved closer to their small fire. In Shirani history, before climate control, many died in natural disasters. We evolved to fear weather we couldn't control. Humans have always lived with weather, Alex said. We fear it too, but we've developed ways to survive it. A particularly loud crack of thunder made both aliens flinch. Alex added more fuel to their fire, keeping the flames steady. The warm light cast a comforting glow inside their shelter. "Tell us more about your grandfather," Keith suggested, clearly trying to distract himself from the storm's fury. "He seems to have been an important influence." Alex smiled at the memory. He grew up in a different time, when people were more connected to the land. He worried that humans were losing important skills as technology advanced. So he made sure I learned them. Did other humans think this was important? Linda asked. Alex shook his head. Most thought it was old-fashioned and unnecessary. Why build a fire when you have a heater? Why make shelter when you have houses? Why find food when you can order it? And yet here we are, Keith said, gesturing to their shelter, alive because of these unnecessary skills. The storm raged through the night. Occasionally, water would find its way through their roof, but Alex quickly showed them how to patch the weak spots. By working together, they kept their shelter secure and relatively dry. Morning came, but the storm didn't break. If anything, it grew stronger. Trees bent nearly horizontal in the wind. The rain was so heavy, it looked like solid sheets of water falling from the sky. "The rescue ship won't be able to land in this," Linda said worriedly. "We have 3 more days before they're scheduled to arrive," Alex reminded her. "This will pass by then." Keith was examining their supplies. "We have enough food for 2 more days if we ration carefully. Then we'll need to find more," Alex said. "I can try to go out when the storm calms a bit." Linda looked concerned. "That seems dangerous." "Staying here without food would be more dangerous," Alex replied. "But I've got an idea for something to help." Using strips of bark and flexible branches, Alex began to weave what looked like a large basket. His fingers moved quickly, the skill clearly well practiced. "What are you making?" Keith asked. "A rain shield," Alex explained. "Like a hat, but bigger. It will keep the worst of the rain off while leaving my hands free." The aliens watched with interest as the simple object took shape. When finished, it looked like a conical hat large enough to cover Alex's head and shoulders. He demonstrated how it would deflect water away from his body. "Clever," Linda said. "A portable shelter extension. Humans have been making things like this for thousands of years," Alex said. Different cultures developed similar solutions to the same problems, even without contact with each other. As the day wore on, the storm's intensity finally began to lessen. The wind remained strong, but the rain lightened enough to see further into the forest. Alex prepared to venture out in search of food. Linda surprised him by standing up. "I will accompany you. 2 sets of eyes will find more." Keith also rose. Our shelter is secure. We should all go to maximize efficiency. Alex looked at them with new respect. The frightened aliens who had huddled miserably in the rain just days. Agile were now volunteering to face the elements. They were learning, adapting, becoming more human in their approach to survival. "All right," he said with a smile. "Let's make 2 more rain shields and head out together." As they worked on their new gear, Alex felt a strange pride, not in himself, but in what they had accomplished together. 3 different beings from vastly different backgrounds, finding common ground in the most basic struggle for survival. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside their simple shelter made of sticks and leaves, something remarkable had happened. They had become a team. The 4th day brought a brief break in the storm. Alex, Linda, and Keith ventured out wearing their handmade rain shields. The forest floor was muddy and littered with fallen branches, but Alex saw opportunity where others might see mess. "Look for fruit that's fallen from the trees," Alex instructed, "and collect these thicker branches. We can use them to strengthen our shelter even more." Linda moved with growing confidence through the wet forest. Her long fingers carefully picked up colorful fruits, sniffing each one before placing it in a makeshift bag woven from flexible vines. "How do you know which plants are safe to eat?" she asked. Alex demonstrated his method. "Small test first. Touch it to your lips to check for burning or tingling. Then a tiny taste. Wait to see if there's any bad reaction before eating more." Keith was examining a fallen tree with interest. "The root structure is exposed. See how it spreads out, rather than going straight down? It provides more stability against wind." Alex nodded approvingly. "You're thinking like a builder now." "That's exactly the principle we used for our shelter's foundation." They gathered food and materials for several hours before the dark clouds began to close in again. Their bags were full of fruits, edible roots, and useful items. When they returned to their shelter. Inside, they sorted their findings. The food would last them several more days. The new branches would make their home even stronger. "I have been thinking," Keith said as he helped reinforce a wall. "The Galactic Alliance classification system for species is flawed." "How so?" Alex asked, weaving smaller branches into a tight pattern. "It places too much emphasis on technological development and not enough on adaptability." Keith's large eyes blinked thoughtfully. "Humans are classified as a level 3 species because your space travel capabilities are limited, but your survival skills would rank at the highest level." Linda nodded in agreement. "Our people would not survive here without technology. Yet humans thrived on their planet for thousands of years before developing advanced tools. We still needed tools," Alex pointed out. "Just simpler ones. Humans have always been tool makers." "But you understand the principles behind the tools," Linda said. "We Shirani know how to operate technology, but few of us understand how to create it from basic elements." The rain returned, gentler now, but steady. Their improved shelter kept them completely dry. The fire burned warm and bright in the stone-lined pit, sending its smoke out through the clever vent Alex had designed. "Tomorrow I want to try something new," Alex said. "I think we can create a water collection system to catch rainwater. It will be cleaner than drinking from the streams." Keith's eyes widened with interest. "Using what materials?" "Large leaves. As funnels, hollow sections of those reed-like plants to channel the water, and we can make containers from that clay-like soil near the stream." Linda tilted her head. "You would make pottery without a kiln?" Alex smiled. "People made pottery before they had proper kilns. It won't be perfect, but it should hold water." The next morning, they set to work on the water collection system. Alex showed them how to shape the clay-like soil into simple bowls. They used coils of the material, stacked and smoothed together. Then they placed the unfired pottery near the fire to dry slowly. The heat removes the moisture without cracking it, Alex explained. It won't be as strong as properly fired pottery, but it will work for now. Keith proved especially skilled at creating the water channels. His understanding of flow dynamics helped him position the hollow reeds at just the right angles to maximize water collection. Linda worked on expanding their shelter. What had started as a simple A-frame was now developing into a more complex structure, with a main room and smaller storage areas. She used techniques Alex had taught her, but added her own improvements. "You're a natural architect," Alex commented. Seeing her work, Linda's face showed the Shirani equivalent of a smile, a slight widening of her large eyes. "I am applying mathematical principles to the natural materials, finding patterns that create maximum strength with minimum resources." As they worked, the sky darkened again. This storm looked different lower clouds, swirling in strange patterns. Alex watched it with concern. "We should get inside soon," he warned. "That doesn't look good." They hurried to complete their current tasks. The water collection system was nearly finished. The expanded shelter was secure. Their food was stored safely above ground level. The first winds hit with surprising force. Trees bent and swayed. Their shelter creaked, but held firm against the gusts. "This planet has fascinating weather patterns," Linda observed from the safety of their home. "The atmospheric dynamics are more complex than most habitable worlds." "Fascinating isn't the word I'd use," Alex said with a laugh. "Terrifying works better." The storm brought not just rain, but hail small frozen pellets that clattered against their roof. Outside, they could hear the impacts against trees and ground. Inside, they remained dry and relatively comfortable. Keith watched the hail with scientific curiosity. "On our homeworld, we control the weather. No precipitation falls without planning and purpose." "That sounds convenient," Alex admitted. "But there's something to be said for adapting to what nature gives you, rather than trying to control everything." Linda had been quiet, thinking. Now she spoke. "I understand why humans develop differently from Shirani. Our species sought to control our environment through technology. Yours learned to adapt to whatever environment you found yourselves in." "Different evolutionary paths," Alex agreed. "Both valid approaches." "But yours is more versatile," Keith said. "Technology can fail. Adaptation skills remain." The storm intensified through the evening. Their shelter withstood the battering wind and rain. The water collection system worked perfectly, funneling clean rainwater into their clay containers. As night fell, they sat around their fire, sharing stories and observations. What had begun as a desperate survival situation had become something else, cultural exchange unlike any in the official Galactic Alliance programs. "When we return to Alliance space," Linda said, "I will recommend changes to the species classification system. Adaptability should be given greater weight and technological advancement." Keith nodded in agreement. "And human instructors should be added to survival training for all Alliance crews. Your methods are invaluable." Alex felt a strange pride at their words. He was just a maintenance technician, low ranking in the Alliance hierarchy. Yet here, stripped of technology and status, his knowledge had proven more valuable than advanced degrees or technical specializations. "One more day until rescue," he reminded them. "Let's make sure they find us in good shape." Outside, the storm continued its assault. But inside their simple shelter built of sticks, leaves, and mud, the three survivors were not just surviving, they were thriving. They had created a temporary home that protected them from the elements. They had found food and clean water. They had even begun to improve their living conditions. And more importantly, they had learned from each other. The aliens had gained practical skills and a new perspective on human ingenuity. Alex had gained respect for the Shirani's quick-learning and analytical minds. As they settled in for the night, the wind howled and rain pounded, but none of them felt afraid anymore. They had faced the worst this planet could throw at them, and they had won. The fifth day dawned clear and bright. For the first time since the crash, sunlight broke through the clouds. The air smelled fresh and clean after days of constant rain. Alex stepped outside their shelter and stretched in the warm light. "Come, look," he called to the others. "The storm is over." Linda and Keith emerged from the shelter, blinking in the brightness. The forest around them glistened with raindrops. Water dripped from leaves and branches, sparkling in the sunlight. "It's beautiful," Linda said softly. Her environmental suit, now permanently powered down, hung loosely on her tall frame. She had adapted to the planet's natural atmosphere surprisingly well. "The rescue ship should arrive tomorrow," Keith reminded them. "We should prepare a signal to help them locate us." Alex nodded. "Good thinking. Let's create something visible from the air." They set to work with renewed energy. Using techniques they had perfected over the past 5 days, they constructed a tall signal tower near their shelter. They wove bright-colored leaves and flowers into patterns that would stand out against the green forest canopy. "This is quite different from standard Alliance emergency procedures," Keith noted as he helped secure the base of their tower. Alex laughed. "The manual doesn't cover what to do when all your technology fails. Sometimes you have to improvise." Linda was arranging large stones in a clearing to form the symbol of the Galactic Alliance, a pattern that any rescue ship would recognize from above. "I have been thinking about our experience here," she said thoughtfully. "On my homeworld, I am a scientist who studies theoretical physics. Yet that knowledge was useless in our survival situation." "Not useless," Alex corrected her. "You applied those principles to improve our shelter design. You just needed to connect theory with practical application." Keith nodded in agreement. "I believe that is the key difference. Humans naturally connect abstract knowledge with physical reality." They worked through the morning, creating clear signals for the rescue ship. Their shelter now, an impressive structure that could almost be called a small house, stood. As testament to their ingenuity and cooperation. In the afternoon, they decided to bathe in a nearby stream that had been too dangerous during the storms. The water was cool and refreshing. Alex showed the Shirani how to use certain leaves that created a mild lather when crushed and rubbed with water. "Natural soap," he explained. "My grandfather taught me which plants have cleaning properties." "Your grandfather would be proud of you," Linda said. "You have honored his teachings by passing them to us." Alex felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sunlight. "Thank you. That means a lot." Clean and refreshed, they returned to their shelter to prepare a celebration meal. Over the days, they had discovered several types of edible fruits, roots, and even some seed pods that tasted nutty when roasted over fire. Together, they created a feast of sorts. As they ate around their fire pit, Keith raised a cup of clean rainwater. "To successful cooperation across species," he said formally. "And to friendship," Linda added. Alex smiled at both of them. "To survival and adaptation." They talked late into the evening, sharing more of their lives and cultures. The differences between them seemed smaller now, less important than what they had in common: curiosity, intelligence, and the will to survive. "When we return to Alliance space," Keith said, "few will believe what we accomplished here." "So we'll show them," Alex replied. "I've been keeping these." He pulled out several smooth stones on which he had used charcoal to draw their progress. From the first simple A-frame to their current multi-room structure, Linda examined the drawings with interest. A physical record, how appropriate for our experience. As night fell, they prepared for sleep, perhaps their last night on this unnamed planet. Their shelter felt like home, now secure, comfortable, and built with their own hands. Morning came. With the distant sound, they had been waiting for the low hum of engines. Alex was first to hear it, waking the others with excitement. They're here. The rescue ship is coming. They rushed outside just as a sleek Alliance vessel appeared above. The forest canopy. It hovered for a moment, then slowly descended toward the clearing where they had placed their stone marker. Our signal worked, Keith said with satisfaction. They gathered their few possessions, the tools they had made, Alex's drawings, and some seeds they had collected from particularly useful plants. Then they made their way to the clearing. The rescue ship was larger than they expected, a full medical transport rather than a simple shuttle. It settled gently on the ground, its landing ramp extending toward them. 4 Alliance officers in pristine uniforms hurried down the ramp. Their expressions showed shock as they took in the appearance of the survivors, dirty, dressed in tattered clothes but healthy and standing tall. Science Officer Linda Ortiz, Navigation Specialist Keith Warren, and Maintenance Technician Alex. "Mason?" the lead officer asked. "That's us," Alex confirmed. "We detected your emergency beacon 5 days ago. We came as soon as possible." The officer looked them up and down. "You appear to be in surprisingly good condition." Linda stepped forward. "Thanks to human technician Mason's survival skills." The rescue team looked confused. One of them gestured toward the impressive shelter visible at the edge of the clearing. "Did you build that from the ship's wreckage?" Keith shook his head. "We built it from materials found in the forest, using techniques Technician Mason taught us." The officers exchanged surprised glances. The lead officer cleared his throat. "Well, the medical team will want to examine you. Please come aboard." As they walked up the ramp, Alex took one last look at their shelter. It stood solid and proud against the forest backdrop, a monument to human ingenuity and alien adaptability. Inside the rescue ship, they were separated for medical examination. Alex found himself in a sterile white room being scanned by advanced medical equipment. The doctor, Ashirani, kept looking at the readings with surprise. "You are in excellent health," she finally said. "Better than expected after 5 days in wilderness conditions." "We adapted," Alex said simply. Later, they reunited in the ship's common area. Linda and Keith had changed into fresh uniforms, but Alex noticed something interesting. Both had kept small items from their experience. Linda wore a woven band of forest fibers around her wrist. Keith had tucked one of their stone tools into his belt. The ship's captain joined them, a tall human woman with gray hair and a serious expression. "Your report is unusual," she said. "The Alliance will want a full debriefing." "We have much to share," Linda said, "including recommendations for changes to survival training and species classification." The captain looked surprised, but nodded. "I look forward to reading it." As the rescue ship lifted off, the 3 survivors watched through a viewport as their temporary home grew smaller below them. The shelter they had built stood out clearly against the forest, sturdy enough to last for months or even years. "Will you miss it?" Keith asked quietly. Alex considered the question. "Parts of it. There's something satisfying about building something with your own hands, about solving problems with just your mind and what nature provides." Linda touched the woven band on her wrist. "I will not forget what I learned here. When we return to Alliance space, I will continue practicing these skills." "As will I," Keith agreed. "Technology is valuable, but understanding fundamental principles is essential." The planet receded from view as the ship accelerated toward space. But the lessons they had learned there, of adaptation, cooperation, and human ingenuity, would remain with them always. In the ship's database, a new entry was created for the unnamed planet. And in the special notes section, 3 words were added. Humans thrive here.